The hardest is the prep.
Yeah, because you have to drink this
We
stuff.
lied.
Yeah. Don't you got don't you have to not eat for how long?
Yeah,
So welcome, junkies. We're talking about colonoscopies.
I don't know how we got into that yet.
This is where real shit happens.
Yeah.
Medical Weekly from your finance junkies.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Oh man, I don't know how we got on this topic.
Yeah.
But I'm apparently 2 years late. I gotta go get my ass checked out.
We're deep in the shit now, guys. We're deep.
Literally and figuratively.
Uh,
Just make sure that we are actually live. Anyone have?
We're live, bro. We're live.
Why don't I ever see it? Okay, yeah, I do see it now. Yeah, TJ's talking about how it was murky waters. I'm like, that's when we go live.
I have a feeling you ate stuff while you were doing your prep, TJ. I think
No, dude, what happened is I was doing this chicken broth, and the chicken broth looked kind of brown. And I was just like, well, dude, it's the chicken broth. They're like, no, it's shit. Like, dude. And
oh my God.
I didn't take it that seriously, bro. And now I got to go do it again. The things that they ask you to turn over. And then the next thing you know, you wake up.
Would they knock you out for that? Wait, they knock you out?
Yeah, bro, they're sticking a tube up your ass, Carlos, and I don't know how big the tube is, so I'm very confused at this point.
Oh my God!
They wake me up.
That is not what I expected.
And I was just like, okay, let me just make sure I didn't enjoy anything because I don't want to come out real confused from this thing. They wait for you to come. They wait for you to come too, and then they start hitting you with the news, bro. They come with these pictures. This is what we saw, and it looks like a fucking volcano. And you're trying to make sense of it, and you're trying to, dude, I'm not even playing.
That was a Subway sandwich.
You're trying to come to, and they're giving you all this fucking data, and then they send you home with this big old manila envelope. And I just gave it to my wife, and I'm like, tell me how bad it is. I couldn't remember what the hell he was saying. I was so out of it. And they don't even let you drive home. Somebody had to a buddy of mine had to drive my ass home, literally.
Yeah.
And
it's a minor sedative. You pretty much wake up after it's done. You don't even remember anything.
Yeah, that's what scares me.
Oh, apparently. Oh shit! I didn't even see.
Hey, Matt.
I'm so sorry, Matt.
Hey,
all good.
Because I texted Matt. I was like, "Oh, we're on." He's like, "I've been backstage listening about you guys getting your asshole ripped open."
Hey, man, happens for the best of us.
Yeah. No, but apparently, Heinz's telling me you're supposed to go at 45. I'm 47, so I'm 2 years late. I got to go get my butthole.
It's a new recommendation. So
yeah. So anyway, welcome to another episode of Finance Junkies, Anime Junkies. How is everybody today? Much more handsome.
Good. My alma mater is crushing it, 35-7, baby. I need just so we all know what we're cheering for. I need them to win by 36 points, and I need 56 points collectively. I was the degenerate. I bet 250 on this parlay, and I win 520.
Oh, you did parlays?
Yeah, parlay. I did the total degen bet. I'm not supposed to win this bet, but when you win them, it feels real good. It's kind of like buying one of those short-term call options. They're not supposed to work out
on the day.
Matty money, they feel pretty good. You don't tell anybody about it because you don't want to condone that kind of behavior.
You only tell people if you win. You only tell if you win, then you brag.
That's what my one buddy does. He's a legit degenerate gambler, and he's like, "Dude, I won $1,200," and I'm like, "I've seen you drop $500, $600 in a game and not say a damn word." So,
well, I'm looking to try to catch the UFC tonight. Anybody into UFC?
Dude, what do you think about the three? Who is it? What's that girl? Shevchenko, however you say her?
Shevchenko, yeah, Shevchenko. Oh man, she was one of my favorites.
And Grass, she's some lady named Grass, real attractive lady.
I'm not happy. Don't get me started on that whole trilogy thing. That's a shame.
So she legit got choked out on the first one. I thought she won the second one. I don't exactly know. Alexa, is that her name? Alexa Kraft?
She should not have lost any of them. She's probably one of the best. One of the best, if not the best female fighter that I've seen. Even more than Amanda Nunes. I was disappointed.
She got tired. That girl exposed her cardio, in my opinion. And
she has great cardio. Anyway, that's a whole other side.
Texas.
Rarely do well.
What the hell was that?
He's watching college.
He's watching college football right now. Yeah, maybe that's why. We'll see.
I got the big screen on the wall, so I'm like, what's it called? Multitasking.
Yeah, your office is legit though, TJ.
Let's get into it, baby. Let's get into it. What are we talking about, Carlos?
Oh man, the bunch of. I'm glad we got Matt here because I did want to just pick up on some stuff of this energy. But basically, the topics I had, and feel free, obviously, if there's things that are on you guys' mind, that the markets seem ready to run. We had like a really shitty week last week, and then out of nowhere, after a shitty Monday, now the markets turn around, and S&P was up 0.5%. And NASDAQ was up 0.5%, but the Russell was up like 3%. So just in general, what do you think's going on right now? Is this all just based on the idea that we are going to get rate cuts this week? This is all just basically pricing in, and we're seeing some of the market rotation. What do you think, TJ?
Man, I like to think, and maybe Matty could help me out because he's, y'all have all been in this game a long time. I want to say it's rate cuts, but dude, I mean, the market's like more forward looking than that. I mean, the writing's on the wall that it's going to be 25 basis points. I would be extremely surprised if he comes in with 50. I actually think 50 would be probably very bearish because then now we're going to start thinking what's broken that we don't know and all the speculation will occur. So, I mean, if it's not already priced in, I just don't think that it can be that. I think that it might be the elections, dude. Both people think that their guy's gonna win, and there's euphoria, or maybe it's also the stuff that I know is going on that people don't talk about because they don't run a hedge fund for a living. But a lot of hedge funds close their fiscal years during this time of the year.
It's a normal rotation.
So they have to make some really big decisions.
Banks did get hit. Yeah, the banks and like fintech in general just did get hit at the beginning of the month. But just real quick, I just want to go around. What does everyone think we're going to get on Wednesday? I think we're getting 50.
I think we're getting 25.
You think we're getting 25? What do you think? What do you think, Heinze? 50 is 25.
I think we're getting 50. I think that's what the jump was for. What the jump was for? Happened, yeah. So I think that's the prediction. I am just in my opinion.
What do you
think? You have a little thing. What is it called? The Fred rate or something? Fed rate? I don't know what it is.
The Fed rate tool.
It tells you.
Can we do a poll? Can we do a poll, Shane?
Yeah. No.
See, we're just it's 25 or 50. I don't think we're getting.
I hope it's 50. I mean, I'm looking a little bit at this point. The thing that's bothering me is I'm looking a little bit beyond. Right. I think there's 3 meetings left. Right. We have the one in September that's coming up this week. We have the one in November, one in December. My hope is that we cut 100 basis points before the end of the year. The thing that I'm most confused about, and I think that's easy, right? The 75 basis points, 100 basis points before the end of the year, I feel like is very predictable, very easy. The thing that's confusing me that I don't know how I'm going to play is 2025. And because I don't necessarily think that there's going to be a cut every single meeting. And so I feel like with that, it's going to involve a lot of volatility, very much comparable to what we saw in 2022 when people weren't 100% certain whether or not they were going to raise this meeting or wait, right? And so I think it's going to be very comparable in terms of that anxiety and weirdness that was kind of around in the market. And that's what drove the market to drop 30-odd%, very rapidly. That including the exuberance that was happening in 2021. I mean, that shit was just insane. But and if anybody was around for that, it was a very fun time until it ended in 2022. But I'm struggling, to kind of think how I'm going to play 2025, and that's where my head is at now because it's only a short 3 months away.
Yeah.
Well, also there's a lot of uncertainty around the election, but I think the markets have priced in a victory from either. Like it's going to be good. I think markets are going to rally on either victory. So you can almost say that the election is kind of moot. It's kind of built in at this point. They're going to rally regardless. So to your point, yeah, it's about what's going to pop and what's going to tank in 2025. And that's part of what I wanted to discuss today too. Is like portfolio positioning. TJ and I, you were talking before we got on here, and you're basically setting yourself up to a point where even if stocks that you're holding, even if you get a little bit of revenue of profit on the value of the shares, you're set to make so much more on the options that your portfolio value could almost double, and you could beat the S&P. By a lot. So for me, what I'm doing is I'm trying to and this is a question that I have for you guys. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to buy long calls that are really outpriced on the stocks that I want to hold for long term, right? Because I feel like that option mispricing is what's going to give me the most alpha versus picking up shares for things on the cheap. So I'm curious what you guys are doing, trying to position your portfolio and take advantage of what's typically a shitty month.
Yeah, I like the long call play, Carlos, but truth be told, I think that long call play probably needed to be in place about 90 days ago. So
but they weren't priced. They weren't priced where they're.
No, I think Tesla. I bought my leaps about 3 to 6 months ago.
Me too.
And those are already printed at 150 for January 2026. I ain't recommending to anybody to buy leaps on Tesla right here, right now.
No, not now.
Volatility. You want to buy when the volatility is kind of chill. You want to sell options when the volatility is high, right? Because you're collecting premium. But when you're the one that's paying premium, you're buying the insurance. You want to do it whenever things are a little bit more chill and status quo. So I wouldn't do that into like a situation with what is it, 1010 or whatever the date is for robo taxi.
And yeah, to be clear, I'm not talking about Tesla. I've got my 330 call options months ago, and they're doing really well, actually.
Sure.
They're doing really well.
So if you find something that's undervalued in your mind, I think that definitely putting some long calls out there. I think I'm going to be a real big fan of running the Poor Man Cover Call campaign in 2025, because I feel like there's going to be a lot of uncertainty in 2025. We're going to be settling into a new presidency, whether it's Kamala or whether it's Trump, and people will be like, well, if it's Kamala, aren't we already kind of used to that? I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I don't work over there. I don't know who really is in charge.
Can you just, well, that's a whole other question. That becomes political junkies. But can you just explain the poor man's covered call?
Sure. It's when you buy typically you buy a leap, theoretically deep in the money at about an 80 delta. I actually like to use the 70 delta. Some people use as much as the 90 delta. The deeper that you go into money, the more it's going to resemble the ownership of shares. So whenever you buy the long call, if the underlying moves up or down, it's almost simulating as you already own the shares. But then you can take those long calls and then you can sell short calls against those to bring some of that premium through the door. That's reducing your break even. So let's say it is Tesla at 150. That's your deep in the money call, or 200 in this case, because Tesla's probably at about 230 right now. For every dollar that you bring in via covered calls, you're reducing your break even on the long call side. So if you have a successful campaign of covered calls, say 5 or 6 times over the course of a year and a half, now instead of Tesla needing to go to like 270 or 280 to break even, maybe it only needs to go to 250, 260 to break even. So it just makes it easier for you to make money, but it requires a lot of management and a lot of skill. So I don't recommend that for the newbie. A lot of these real big financial YouTubers, they tout them as small account strategies. And I don't really promote it for a small account strategy unless you're a small account that has big knowledge, because a poor man cover call campaign requires a lot of time and a lot of knowledge, and it's understated too much, in my opinion. And it's a really, really dangerous strategy for people that don't know any better. If you're just looking for something to print, dude, your best chance is just buy long call and leave them alone and let them print. You know what I mean? But it's one of those things, man. I have a real small platform, so I don't reach a lot of people, but I just like telling people the way that it is, not the way that they want to hear it. If you have time on your hands and if you have a big skill set, then you can make a shitload of money with the Poor Man Cover Call campaign. And I think 2025 is going to lend itself to that. It's probably going to be more capital efficient than owning a bunch of dead money in shares, because I don't know that we're going to get that capital appreciation.
Well, speaking of which, there is a lot of money, a record amount of money sitting on the sidelines. And so every year, that's sort of typically what 2% the money supply gets printed. It gets spread out among these assets, but we've got a lot more money sitting on the sidelines now. That's gotta get into some assets. What are you thinking, Matt? What are you calculating over there? 2025.
I still don't necessarily know.
I mean, a little bit. Just lower your mic.
Sorry. I think the one thing that
the volume.
Oh, my fault.
It's a little loud. Well, let me know in the chat if he sounds just a little loud. Yeah, me too, Laura. Me too. Typically, this would be the month when Bitcoin would run. It would run the month before the actual rate cuts go into effect, but that hasn't been the case. Although we're primed. We're primed, and I think once that actually comes, I think we're going to be fine by the end of the year. But anyway, you were saying, Matt?
Is it fixed?
Yeah, it sounds better now.
Okay. Yeah, I turned it gain down a little bit. I think it's tough. I think an easy play that I think a lot of people are forgetting about, and Chris and I talk a little bit about it a lot on Cash Flow Chronicles, is kind of like preferred equity. I think there is some preferred equities out there, but also just playing the 20-year, I think won't be too bad either. It's already started to run a little bit, but I think, and I'm not saying to hold on to it forever, but I think if you're looking for a trade, I think buying something like a TLT will be pretty decent, because where we're at is you basically have high yields right now. And when you have high yields and then you're cutting to the lower yields, basically the value of the bonds that were just basically made over the past 18 months, the face value of those are going to basically skyrocket to be able to keep in line with the current yields. And as yields go down, basically the value of those bonds will come up to keep in face value with or basically the coupon rate that's currently being put out there. So you'll see that, like, from 2021 to 2023, TLT took a massive dump. And a lot of that was just because we raised interest rates so drastically and so quickly. And so the exact opposite, not the exact opposite, because we were going from 0 interest rate to 5%, but, a comparable, sort of move will happen to the other side. So I wouldn't be surprised you end up seeing TLT in 110, 120 range within the next 6 to 12 months. And so that, I think, is pretty easy. Another thing that I think a lot of people might forget about is, there's nothing wrong with just holding money in cash. But I think another thing is, if people are holding cash, think about doing some CDs, especially if you're looking out for like 6 to 12 months, and you were just like, oh, I'll just keep it in a savings account.
You get nothing.
When rate cuts start happening next week, you're really going to start to see the savings rates for money market accounts, large personal savings accounts, really start to take a huge hit. So if you were banking on easy money at, say, 5% forever, like some people were looking at Schwab and Fidelity and just holding their money in those money market accounts, unfortunately, those are also going to take a hit. So just a light reminder for folks that might be saving for like a home or something and really aren't investing that money, and you still want to make a little bit of return, just look and make sure you lock in that yield using a CD or some sort of other, whether it's a treasury that matures within the next 26 weeks, like something like that you can buy today to lock in for 6 to 12 months if you need that money. Because I know sometimes we have a lot of things going on, myself included, right? I have 40, 50 grand on the side in case there's a house I want to buy. I want to make sure we're putting a lot of our Airbnb money that we're getting in early for next year's summers. We're putting that into money market accounts. And I'm like, what are we going to do with this? Like, it's just kind of sitting here. Should we put a CD ladder in? Because rates are going to start getting cut. And so it's just about maximizing some of that other stuff. But in terms of...
So you're saying to lock it in now? You're saying like get it in now?
Some of that stuff. But I think there still is an opportunity, and this is the last thing I'll say, because I know I've been on a little bit of a monologue. But the one thing that I think a lot of folks have yet to truly take advantage of is there has been some recovery of this, but from 2021 to 2023, that 60 to 80% declines in some of those small caps that are very unprofitable. Some of them have truly right-sized themselves, and some of them have set themselves up for the next 2 to 3 years with profitability. And a lot of them had to take on dilution and a lot of these other things to be able to keep the capital coming in, because the interest rates haven't been favorable for them. But now that you're getting rate cuts, some of these opportunities might come back into play and really show that they can play with the bigger boys, and they have become more profitable. They've gotten themselves in a more efficient manner. They've learned over the past 2 years. And so, I think that there's a lot of companies out there that are just about to hit that curve of profitability that'll come out on the other side in the next 12 to 18 months. Of course, my big play is Rocket Lab. I'm not going to try to push that down anyone's throat.
I've been following you on X with that.
Yeah.
And what SpaceX has been doing lately is bringing more attention to them. So
yeah, they're doing a good job. But I think more to come on that. There's a lot of risks to be realized over the next 12 months, or hopefully not realized over the next 12 months. That'll eventually be reduced to roadblocks. But I think there's a lot of other companies out there that have really taken the last 18 months to get and right size their balance sheet and their financial fortress going into 2025, and will massively benefit from lower interest rates going into 2025 and 2026.
Mm-hmm. And I do want to ask you some questions about specifically about energy, because I am seeing I'm just seeing that we've got a tremendous energy demand that's coming up. And I don't know, we didn't get a chance to talk. I kind of had a change of heart. You and I had several conversations about energy over the last couple of years. And I was like, touting the solar and fossil fuels, et cetera, et cetera. Having done my research, I've sort of revised that position. And I feel like fossil fuels do not need to be as demonized as they once were. And they're actually super important. And it's not necessarily also about solar, but nuclear. And so my question is, hey, I got some stats here. Let me see. I was asking ChatGPT some stuff here. Let me see. Here we go. And then I want to get some opinions on how
I think something that we can all agree upon, right, is whether it's solar or whether it's hydrocarbon and fossil fuels, we just need to stop using coal. Like in terms of anything, coal is the most inefficient that's out there for energy source at the moment. And luckily, a lot of what's been done in the United States since the early 2000s is decoal. Like, a lot of West Virginia small towns and Western Pennsylvania small towns have absolutely been destroyed due to the lack of the coal industry. And that's kind of sad to see that. But in terms of global prosperity and the actual emissions that are coming out of the United States have actually gone down over the last decade because of the use and transition from coal to more natural gas. And so I think you're right. I mean, it's a place where it's a trilemma, as they call it, right? It's making sure that the emissions are right, making sure that the price of these things is right, and making sure that people have access to it. And so unfortunately, you can't just say we're switching to solar overnight. And I hope that we get the infrastructure built. But I think right now, as you've seen, how much it costs to put the infrastructure there, how much time, it's going to take a couple decades before it really gets to a place where it's as efficient as, say, a lot of these fossil fuel things. But I agree, there needs to be a shakeup, because I think there's been too much lobbying, too much people sitting on their laurels and saying oil's cheap, we'll just keep using oil. But we really do need to get to a place where things are sustainable for the long term.
Well, let me put some numbers so we have some perspective here. I'm just going to read some stuff here. The energy needs. As of 2023, the U.S. consumes about 4,000 terawatt hours of electricity annually. AI data centers, driven by rapid growth of artificial intelligence, are projected to demand significantly more energy over the next 5 years. Right now, data centers are about 4% of the U.S. electricity consumption, but this is going to surge to 20 to 25% by 2030. And to put these in perspective, the numbers, let me see if I can get the actual numbers. By 2030, U.S. data centers alone. So this is like all the AI. This is the advancements in AI that we're talking about. It consumes somewhere between 500 and 600 terawatt hours of electricity annually, which equals 500 to 600 billion kilowatt hours. Currently, data centers are around 4%, et cetera, et cetera. Last year, the U.S. generated approximately 150 gigawatts of solar capacity. So it's clear that this is just not enough. The other thing that I wanted to ask you about, Matt, is this. For this kind of energy demand, doesn't this have to be its own doesn't it have to be its own infrastructure? Because I can't imagine that if you've got that much power needed by a data center, that you can have this being produced anywhere but very close to where the energy is going to be consumed. No? Like the energy needs to be consumed, or the energy needs to be created very close to where the energy is going to be consumed. So this is more of a localized solution because of just the energy demands and the loss that you get when you start traversing this over distances.
I think there's two things, right? Like you stated, you can't just run data centers for 12 hours during the day. So I think, and I'm not trying to build solar. I think solar is a great solution, and there's been massive efficiency strides made over the past 10 to 20 years in terms of being able to get solar from low teens efficiency of conversion from sunlight to the actual efficiency that we use to the mid 20s. And it's been absolutely phenomenal. And in some cases, even with like Rocket Lab, they make solar panels for space, and they're 30-something% efficient. Like that's astonishing to be able to capture the energy from the sun and turn a third of it into energy. It's absolutely amazing. But I think the thing that is most concerning, and this is something that Elon actually at Tesla is doing a good job of, is really the battery packs and really understanding how that is a big piece of what the infrastructure needs going forward. Because you can have as much solar as you want, but as soon as the sun goes down or it starts 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, you get very little efficiency in terms of the actual conversion from solar. So you need to be able to store that. So it's almost like you need to double or triple the size of your solar array and store it within a panel, a battery. So that way overnight you could either draw from local grids elsewhere or be able to expel that energy throughout the night. And so that's the piece that I think, you're right. It needs to be localized, but also you need to have the appropriate storage capacity, which right now is pretty expensive. But I think over time, it's kind of like the computer, right? The processing power is going to double, triple, and the size of these things are going to get smaller and smaller as we make them more efficient.
All right, real quick, let's see if Tevis actually wants to show his face. He popped on.
Oh, man. All right. Well, Tevis is here.
Everybody's got to go
later. Yeah.
No, we'll just keep looking at stuff. He was on a second ago. I don't know if he's like getting a drink or maybe he's getting a colonoscopy. I don't know. I don't know. But the question is like, all right, so this is fundamentally at odds with this idea of like climate change, existential threat. We need to actually lower our consumption. It is not possible to lower our energy consumption over the next 5 years and actually remain competitive. The other part of this is Bitcoin mining, right? In order for us to be, I got the numbers on that too. Right now, this is how much energy Bitcoin mining, where is this? Bitcoin uses right now is expressed. Bitcoin mining uses about 50 to 100 billion kilowatt hours annually. To become a leader in to become a leading player in cryptocurrency mining, particularly the Bitcoin by 2023, energy consumption will be essential. The top Bitcoin mining operations consume between 1 and 5 terawatt hours electricity annually. You might need to consume anywhere between 1 billion kilowatts to 5 billion kilowatt hours per year. So it seems like energy is a really important next sort of battleground, which is interesting because the rich countries have the power and the finances to be able to basically build out whatever infrastructure they need to make themselves competitive. But then you have the third world countries that have cheap access to energy that also will allow them to be competitive. So it's almost like this battle of energy the next couple of years is a level playing field in that sense, where the big companies have the resources and the smaller companies have access to like lower energy prices. What do you guys think of that? Tevis? What's up, man?
What's going on, guys?
Got to switch some things around. Here we go. There we go. Got to keep everybody looking. How's it going? Energy drinks. Yeah, exactly. Energy drinks. Whatever you do. I know. Maybe that's me. I'm doing you guys. If you haven't tried this is my new favorite. Have you guys tried this? The Red Bull Red.
Is that the no sugar one?
Is it the watermelon?
Yeah. Holy shit. My body dude, it is crack. Like I was like, I like the regular Red Bull, but holy shit, is this good? This is what's been getting me through those 100-hour work weeks that I've been pulling lately. So real quick, Matt, that was a question for you since you're like the energy guy. How do you rectify those two things? How do we rectify the need to get control over our emissions and be climate conscious while at the same time remaining competitive? And if the other countries in the world don't give a shit, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but the US is responsible for say 15% of the global emissions. It's not a lion's share. So how do we position ourselves to capture the alpha that's coming while the US tries to remain competitive over the next 5 years?
I think we have a 5-year advantage with one thing, and that's natural gas prices. So we have a lot of excess natural gas capacity that's been generated over the past 10 to 15 years through horizontal drilling and fracturing. So, the things that like Kamala is trying to get rid of in a lot of states. And it's been contentious, right? I think other countries have gotten rid of it.
Apparently she walked that back.
We'll see. I think a lot of countries have already banned it. I think there's a lot of, bad press behind it. There's bad operators out there that, of course, damage water tables and, of course, have caused problems in places around the world. But there's a lot of regulation behind it already. And if you do it effectively, there should be zero problems associated with any sort of real surface level contamination or anything of the like, but it uses a lot of chemicals. So I get where some people might be initially, offset without the proper education on it. Mm-hmm. But I think the benefit, actually going to what the benefit has been in the United States specifically, is we've been able to increase our natural gas production so much so that we've flooded the local market in the United States, that we have some of the cheapest natural gas prices in the entire world, maybe other than local areas within Russia. And so we've had this dependence with respect to Russian natural gas with the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, etc., being blown up, and everyone else trying to defocus their grid off of nuclear energy and coal and focus on wind and solar. They've really put themselves in a bind, specifically in Europe and as well as in Japan, who's also lowering their dependence on nuclear energy. But with that, they have gas prices that are 5 to 6 times what we have in the United States right now. And it might only get exacerbated as we go into the latter half of the next decade, as they continue to defocus on nuclear. And the only country that's probably not screwed is France, because they have a very large nuclear grid over there. But with respect to gas prices right now, for the next 5 years, we don't have too many LNG facilities that are going to be coming online. LNG, for those people that don't know, it takes the natural gas, the methane that you use in your house, and shrinks it to about 1/600th of its size and liquefies it and hypercools it down to like negative 250 degrees, makes it so it's like oil, right? You can transport it. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And that was my other question about the advantages that some of the natural resources have in being transportable, where you can export them. Like solar is not readily exportable because you're not going to be exporting batteries, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a really good point. I mean, that gets back to the local piece, right? Solar is very prominent in the southwestern part of the United States and does really well here in Texas as well. But as you get into Canada and you get into the northeastern part of the US, it loses some of its effectiveness. That's not to say it's useless. It just might mean that you don't have optimal sort of efficiencies like you would in bright, beautiful California. So
that's a funny comment. That's a good comment.
Yeah. But that's another piece. So you said, right, like if you think about all the disparate islands that are in Indonesia, or if you think about all the different islands that are in Southeast Asia, how easy is it going to be? Yeah, how easy is it going to be to increase the solar capacity of each individual one of those small islands? And if you think about EU and the United States, those are, and generally Canada and Mexico, we all play well with each other, right? And generally those borders, specifically when it comes to trade and things of the like, I mean, not necessarily people crossing the borders, but the actual energy capacity crossing the borders, and oil coming from Canada. There's 3 million barrels of oil that comes in from Canada every single day to the United States. So in that type of situation, we play really well with each other. Same thing with the EU. Africa is not that way. And so when you think about all the different countries that are within Africa and all the different governments that are really at attack with each other, how easy is it going to be to have a solar grid in Ghana and transport it across the border? How easy is it going to be to have a wind turbine in some of these peaks in the Sahara Desert and export that south? Right. I don't think people recognize how easy it is that we have it in Europe, where we've created all these treaties across, meaning the EU, and you have
they're also
basically all these.
Those countries are in closer physical proximity to each other than some of the distances that we're talking about, and then you have to factor in losses on top of the inefficiency. So it's like different solutions. And it seems like it needs to go to a more localized solution where the natural resources that make sense for that area need to pop up. The point is that over the next couple of years, the current way that we're producing electricity is not going to be sufficient to continue to push the AI revolution and the data centers. And it seems to me that those need to be localized solutions and not necessarily things that are like on our grid. It's like a whole different infrastructure that's locally set up for that. Right? Like, so if they build a nuclear power plant, then all of the companies build their servers around it. That's what it seems like to me.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of things as well. I mean, maybe I have a bias because I'm here in Texas, but like anytime the wind blows harder than 5 miles an hour, we lose power. And TJ probably knows what I'm talking about. So
really?
I mean, Texas kind of has its own standalone grid, so we can't pull across the border from Louisiana or Oklahoma or anything like that. So it's almost like, and if you think about it that way, if you're talking about more solar specific and wind specific individual power plants, it goes back to needing those battery sources. So I've actually done a lot of research personally for my own home, where it's like, even if you have solar that's connected up to the existing grid, if the wind blows over it, it knocks over your, was that me that lost internet?
Is it blowing right now? Is the wind blowing right now? Check outside.
The wind's probably blowing right now. I mean, is it raining? So I mean, if you think about it, if a tree falls over and knocks over your electricity pole, you lose power regardless if it's solar, natural gas, or nuclear, right? And so I think you're right. I mean, you need to have a little bit more of that idea to power grids with respect to the battery cell backups before you really get to expand beyond where we are today.
So I sort of joined in late, so I'm just trying to catch up. And I have no idea around how this would work. I'm just thinking about it from a more first principles perspective to say that, okay, well, if AI has a high demand on electricity, wouldn't that cost then be passed down and subsidized by the individual corporations to essentially be a part of their P&L? Like the grid overload problem, and again, I might be oversimplifying, or this might be the wrong take, Matt, but that to me seems like a government problem or inefficiency or government infrastructure problem. If Google can't power their own servers, Google is going to build their own energy source on a separate grid funded by that private entity. And so there would be
or invest in the companies that are doing that and take real estate right next door, and you build out your servers right near it.
Either way, like what we know that these large corporations are spending hundreds of billions of dollars investing in AI. This would be a part of that, and by doing that, it almost splits it out from the grid to not add an additional strain. Am I sort of on the right track?
You're not wrong. I mean, I'm not as well versed in that, so I'll just be point blunt with that. But I do want to say you have seen specific larger corporations like the Microsofts, Googles, Amazons approach some of these energy companies to have that collaboration, specifically when it comes to reducing emissions, because everyone has their 2030, 2050 goals for reducing emissions total. So a lot of these folks are either trying to get to net zero by 2030 or 2050. And so they're trying to collaborate with each other, whether it's the large international oil companies or whether it's with some of the utility companies, to get some of these renewable sources to offset their carbon footprints. And so you can actually look on a lot of these websites and see that Google has gone directly to some of the energy providers to create some of these independent infrastructure. How it actually works, is it all in Silicon Valley or in the California desert? Versus is it spread across the entirety of the US? That I don't know, right? And that's where it kind of, gets a little bit over my head. But you do see these multi-gigawatt sort of deals that are going on, and gigawatt is big, right? I mean, generally when we're talking about the individual household, we're talking about kilowatts per hour, right? We might be 30, 50 kilowatts per hour on an independent basis that we're using. We're talking about gigawatts, which is 2 magnitudes above on an individual house basis. So, like I said, I don't know enough about that, Tevis, to really speak on it.
Well, here's what's interesting. The S&P just rebalanced, right? And so I'm just going to go through some of the companies that were removed and some of the companies that were added. Obviously, we know Palantir was added, right? But look, American Airlines booted, Etsy, Biorad Laboratories, Dish Network, Lincoln National, Newell Brands, Seagate, SolarEdge, off out of the S&P, Advanced Auto Parts, DXC Technology. I don't know what they do, but they were replaced by Palantir, Dell, Erie Indemnity, Blackstone, Airbnb, Zoom, Westco International, CrowdStrike. What do you notice based on the companies that were removed and what was replaced?
AI.
AI is big, and also software companies.
Yeah.
So I have a stat here. Over the past decade, software and technology companies have significantly increased their representation in the S&P. In 2013, these companies made up about 19% of the index. By 2023, it's 28% of the index. And what it's saying, the surge in representation of the companies is part of a broader trend. Likely intellectual software now make up 90% of the total value of the S&P 500, highlighting the importance of technology and software in the U.S. economy. So basically, our top 500 companies now are on some level software or AI based. And so we understand that like having the energy to run that is a fundamental. So that's like the picks and shovels, right, of this emerging technology, which is now our basically our most valuable companies.
I mean, it is kind of crazy, right? Because
crazy
in so many ways, you thought this internet, revolution would revolutionize other verticals and industries, and meanwhile, you have such advancements in software, and now even more extrapolations of that with AI. But then you have an education system that hasn't been revamped in hundreds of years. You have, railways, subways, all of this transportation system that hasn't been revamped. The electrical grid is a piece of shit. Like there's so many legacy systems out there that when growth happens, it happens very like asymmetrically and doesn't happen across the board. And you would think that, the internet or AI or, take your pick of whatever revolutionary, paradigm shift, that would be the rising tide to raise all ships. But it's really concentrated in, what vertical it affects. I don't know. It just blows my mind sometimes to think about like on a wider scale.
Mm-hmm. Well,
I will say that. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish the
I was going to say the thing that I think I'm most surprised about is if this conversation were happening 40, 50 years ago, and specifically the poll that you have in the chat, I very much think that many people would be voting for wind, solar, and oil, but not many people would be voting for nuclear. It felt
don't you think that has to do with the stigma though of how nuclear energy was weaponized? If we had electric bombs that you were blasting cities with electricity, or I think it would have. We'd be in a much different place with
that, and I don't think you'd have Chernobyl. You didn't have Chernobyl. You didn't have 3 Mile Island. You didn't have some of these other nuclear meltdowns that people were very scared of. Kind of being, I guess, propagandized. And I agree with you. People were kind of fearful of the nuclear explosions that might ensue had they had some sort of meltdown, like what happened potentially at Fukushima.
It's warranted because there have been accidents, and if you have accidents at your local,
but they're vastly overblown in terms of the proportion and the scale to which it affects. And I mean, like, you have this massive, like, oil and gas is like the largest industry in the world, or is it auto? One of those. It's definitely like top 5.
They're related either way
in the world, and like, yeah, of course, they're going to benefit off of keeping oil and gas as the standard.
That's right. You make a good point about like lobbying and pushing a narrative to not affect your bread and butter.
To the point that Matt was saying, 40 years ago, it would all be about wind and solar, and nobody would be talking about nuclear. Maybe it is because of nuclear weapons or whatnot, or safety issues. I think that's largely been disproven these days, and I think people are getting a little more wise to that. Like, people are understanding that the sheer output of nuclear energy is there. It's clean. You don't have all these carbon emissions. There's obviously a lot of loopholes in getting these plants up and running, not to mention the capital and constraints that are required to kind of keep that going. But to give you an example, like I'm up here in Canada. We live in Alberta. It's a very oil and gas centric province. We just live and breathe oil up here. Most of our energy comes from that source. They are trying to get a little bit more into renewables like wind and solar. We got wind farms and stuff like that up here. But recently, I think twice in the last year, we've had some pretty big outages. And the reason is because we haven't had the output. I think there was just a perfect storm of, cloud cover, nighttime. We had not enough wind to power these windmills, and we had some blackouts. And it really raised the issue. Our premier of the province, she's really bringing up, we need to, concentrate on this oil and gas. It's not just solved by building some more windmills and building more solar panels. We have some serious input. So when that happened, we had to import a bunch of energy from Saskatchewan, our neighboring province. We had to get some up from California. Like we couldn't fuel the grid, so we imported like a few hundred megawatts just to get by. And so that kind of raised the issue of like this wind and solar stuff. It's just not sustainable. Like it's just not going to be enough. So now, like we are floating the idea of like small modular reactors and stuff, but that's got its own can of worms, like trying to get that through politics. But yeah, it's an interesting point to talk about for sure.
Well, Matt, I have a question for you because you're the expert on this. So if we did shift to, you know, more welcoming of nuclear, how would this impact the, you know, our relationship with, you know, the petro countries, the Middle East? How would that impact the petrodollar?
Petrodollar, in my opinion, is already pretty big at risk, just based off of what's been kind of going on with Ukraine and Russia. I feel like you've seen a lot of strain in the petrodollar just in general. You see that a lot of oil sales, specifically in China, are actually happening in the yuan these days. And you know, you have a lot of people taking sides with this whole deglobalization based off of these fights that have been going on with respect to the Middle East, Israel and Iran, and then you have Ukraine and Russia. Russia has now gotten stronger ties with India and China over this because Russia never stopped producing that oil, right? I mean, they're just selling it to different people. We used to sell it to Europe, and we used to import some to the United States. And now that they're no longer doing that, they're importing a lot more to India. And so now you have India, who's generally tries to stay pretty neutral, now kind of siding with Russia and trying to create more alliances with some of the folks that play nicer with Russia and China. So I think that's a little bit tougher on the petrodollar, but when it comes to nuclear, I mean, you do have people reaching out to the United States. I forget who it was. Was it, I don't know if it was Turkey or somebody that was actually reaching out to the United States for help and assisting creating some of these nuclear plants. And then also you see a lot of diversification coming out of the Middle East, more specifically Saudi Arabia and Abu Dhabi, really trying to invest in the United States infrastructure. So you actually see them have picked up, and Europe does this a lot as well, some of the wind turbines throughout the United States, the onshore wind, but you've also seen them invest heavily into the LNG facilities. I wouldn't be surprised if you see them diversify into nuclear as well. And I know that, I don't know if it was UAE or if it was Kuwait, but one of the two is actually bringing, or maybe it might have been Qatar as well. So one of these three are also diversifying into nuclear themselves. And so I don't know. I think I don't have an answer for you, Heinze. I really don't. But what I am seeing is a large diversification out of oil in the Middle East. And so strengthening those bonds between the European countries, the Middle Eastern countries, as well as the U.S. countries and the Middle Eastern countries, I think it might shift when it comes to relaxing a little bit on oil and natural gas production. But I think it might strengthen as well in certain areas if you continue to see this wanting of diversification into nuclear that you're seeing in the Middle East. What I can say is based off of what I see and what we're kind of forecasting is the last barrel of oil will probably come out of the Middle East. There's just so much volume there, and it's so cheap to produce there comparatively to the rest of the world that it's just advantageous on a cost basis to be able to go into the Middle East. So unless you have oil at $500 or $600 a barrel, which is completely different and magnitudes different from where we are today. If we continue to live in this cheap oil world of $60, $70 a barrel, it just doesn't make sense to go into different countries to produce, because the infrastructure, the steel, all that stuff with inflation continues to go up. But on an inflation adjusted basis, oil prices are as cheap as ever, right? I mean, you think about it, we were paying $60 a barrel pre-pandemic, and here we are 5-6 years down the road, and we're paying $60-$70 a barrel, and everything else has gone up 30-40%. So
that's due to being able to control the supply, because there is essentially an infinite supply, and that was the core of my question. If AI and like just say AI and crypto, right? If the demands of energy are so great that it's going to force a certain percentage of our grid to become more localized, doesn't that weaken the leverage that these oil producing companies have over the rest of the world, say like the undeveloped world has over the developed world. And isn't that actually strengthen our sovereignty as a nation and national security if we're not as reliant, because just because of the nature of it, we need to generate this power locally. So fine, the stigma with nuclear and having to get rid of the nuclear waste, say that those things are solved. Doesn't that actually benefit the US on a number of levels, or even all of the countries that adopt this new strategy? Isn't that the way the world's going?
I don't have an answer, but my personal thought is yes. I mean, with everything that's happened with the sanctions in Russia, the only people that we're truly dependent upon for oil now, we do still get a little bit from Venezuela, but Canada, in respect to the United States imports, I mean, Canada is really the only country that we really import a lot of oil from. And then the rest, I mean, we make 13 million ourselves, which is surprising. And then we import 3 million barrels a day from Canada. I don't really know who else we're importing from that extra 2 to 4 million barrels a day that we need.
But Matt, don't we have the infrastructure between like in Texas, we have the Eagle Ford Shale, the Permian Basin. In North Dakota, we have the back end. I don't know what they call that there in Pennsylvania and Alaska. I mean, between those, I mean, aren't we self-sufficient? We're just choosing not to for political reasons and butthurt feelings. And there's people that died here millions of years ago, potentially feelings. So, I mean, isn't all of this shit kind of unnecessary for this country to even have to rely on anybody else when we have plentiful of resources of our own to not have to import jack fucking shit? I mean, just calling it spade a spade, because I worked in the industry.
Wasn't the point of Texas having their own grid, right? To just not
I mean, I guess the question is like, if we needed to rely on ourselves, regardless of price, we could. I think the reason why we're only making 13 million barrels a day the only reason why we're making 13 million barrels a day is because at some point you do start to hit, lifting cost limits and the ability to drill. There's billions upon billions of barrels in the Four Corners area of the United States that is yet to be tapped. And a lot of that is due to the fact that it's super small, nano perm sort of rocks, nano permeability rocks, nano Darcy, rocks that require a lot of fracking, require a lot of stages of fracking, and it's a lot easier to just go after the Permian. But if oil prices go up in a capitalistic society, if oil prices went to, let's just say $150 a barrel and stayed there, then I can foresee the United States getting to 15, 16 million barrels a day. But I think you just have this sort of balance that happens where, and also with the companies that are developing resources in the United States, a lot of that money goes to share buybacks as well. They don't want to get themselves in a situation like happened in 2014, 2015, where oil prices go from $100 a barrel down to 30. And next thing you know, they're blowing cash on a lot of these wells that they're drilling for 2 to 3 years while they're waiting for prices to recover. But if you're talking about independent of, let's say, costs, the United States could easily be energy self-sufficient. And in fact, I think because we have such easy natural gas as well, it'd be super easy to be self-sufficient with natural gas. I think that there's very easily the United States can be energy independent. I think the only problem is like you stated, TJ, is the oil. And I think that could be easily solved as well if you remove the capital constraints piece, and you were to subsidize it. Like, let's say you were to actually, I don't want to say nationalize, but if you were to have like a national oil company that subsidized some of the oil and gas drilling, then easily there's billions of barrels that remains to be produced.
Isn't it like it's not necessarily a matter of supply for the US, it's just way cheaper, right? Like they have a comparable advantage between the production costs, transportation costs of buying Middle Eastern oil than setting up drilling, hiring all that stuff in the country locally. Like it's just so much cheaper to buy it. Like why would they ever, if it's for strategic reserves perspective, I get it, but like why would they ever consume their own oil?
And isn't it also a bargaining tool for the U.S. to be able to go into a country and say, hey, we've got a lot of money. We will buy some of that oil, even if we can produce it locally. It just gives you leverage in other parts of the world by essentially throwing your money around. Because now you have them dependent. It's like we're dependent on their oil, but they're dependent on our money.
There's also different regimes too, right? Like the United States is mostly tax and royalty. So like you basically say, whatever we produce, we're going to give you 15% of. And that either could be the landowner in the Gulf of Mexico that goes to the government. So if you think about it,
right.
Yeah. And if you go into, say, Iraq, for example, a lot of those are production sharing agreements. So they might pay you a couple pennies per dollar to recuperate some of your costs. They might pay you. So different regimes work for different parts of where you are in the economic cycle. And so when it's actually really, when oil price goes to zero, you're still getting paid the couple pennies per barrel. But when oil prices go to $150 a barrel, you really wish you weren't getting paid that pennies per barrel. You wish you were getting the entire, the whole barrel that you could sell on your own. So that's also a diversification piece of how you want to structure your portfolio, because you can have an entire regime change, all these countries with respect to all these different regulations. Like the North Sea used to be 50, 60 years ago, prime time. It used to be the game. It used to be the Super Bowl every day in the North Sea. Then you have Norway trying to reduce their emissions and trying to kind of step away and say like, hey, we're not necessarily playing in that game anymore. You have Britain introducing windfall taxes, making it like every profit of every barrel is getting charged 75%. Like you have to have that sort of diversification in that sort of realm. So it kind of goes back to how do you want to structure your company and portfolio? Anyway, I might be going off on a tangent. That's not helpful, but you have to think different regimes. And that's why a lot of people love to come to the United States, because you just pay that 15% and they're not going to be like, oh, by the way, we're nationalizing this now, like you would in Venezuela, right? Like this is our shit now. Get out of here. You're not allowed to produce here anymore. So it's interesting how globally some of this stuff gets done.
I just find it interesting. So I'm glad. I'm really glad to get your sort of like expert, high level of macro opinion on this stuff. Makes me feel like I think you were saying, TJ, I don't have enough Tesla shares because I think they're one of the companies that are going to benefit. And I do think that the investments in solar companies like Enphase, I'm super happy that I've got the position that I've got. I just think energy is going to be a much bigger part of the overall conversation. And even further down the line, like another company that I invest in, like Innovix, as we start getting into like just powering all these devices, we just need more cheaper power. And there's an opportunity there to get in on the ground level. And so just taking it back to the top of this conversation that you missed, Tevis, we were talking about positioning, portfolio positioning, going into the end of the year and setting up for next year. What how do you feel about your positions now? There was a big rotation out. SoFi did not get any love this month. And so what are you thinking over the next 3 or 4 months as we go to the end of the year and into next year?
Dude, people are projecting 3 cuts before the end of the year. So we're gonna have cuts all throughout 2025. Risk on assets are gonna catch a bid in that scenario, right? The high growth, because cost of borrowing is going to just be cheaper essentially. So people are going to go more risk on.
That should be good for SoFi.
Well, SoFi is going to benefit. I mean, I mentioned this in the past, like they're going to benefit dually from their inherent business benefiting in the form of their student loans and their home loans, and their entire financial services segment, but also the stock benefiting because it's going to be in a basket with other, smaller market cap companies that benefit from a risk on environment. So we've seen some of that getting rotated. At the top, we were talking how the S&P and the NASDAQ were up like 0.5%, but the Russell was up like 3%. So it seems like, yes, in that risk on environment, maybe companies like this will get some love. I think the election is just the crapshoot that I'm more concerned about, is because the markets are actively.
It matters? You think it matters at this point?
I do think it matters.
What is the crapshoot though? I mean, we've already had 4 years of Trump, and we're already going on the 4th year of Biden, which this would essentially almost feel like an extension of that. So, I mean, how much uncertainty is there really, or is it just people just cheering on their team to win?
It is, man. Because, well, I mean, it's a short term, uncertainty, right? It's not necessarily like, oh, are we going to be good in the next several years or not? It's like, are we going to be good in the next several months? Because the market is placing bets based on who they want to win, based on the economic activity that certain candidate will spur or hinder. And the fact of the matter is, leading up to the election in itself is a lot of volatility and the uncertainty. I mean, just looking at the news like this week, they're like provoking Russia, to a war.
That is scary. That is scary.
Guys, like, can you just fuck off? Like, let me just make some money and just not, get drafted to a war. Like, what the hell? And so, like, shit like that, I think, is going to obviously rattle markets in the short term. But, I think come November, there's going to be volatility.
So let me frame it. Let me frame it to you this way, then, Tevis. All that being said, are you really going to make any drastic moves in your portfolio, regardless of who wins? Or is it kind of just a fun nothing burger to talk about? Because I looked at my portfolio through and through, and I can't convince myself to make like a big drastic move. Like if Trump happens, I'm doing this. If Kamala happens, I'm doing this. I'm going to put cost select premium. We're in this fucking thing for 20 years, bro.
I'll admit, I did. I was in 2016. I was concerned. I put like 5 or 10% stop losses on everything. Like, yeah, because I mean, I was. It's also going back almost 10 years now. I was
zero.
A different investor, and then when like the next day, like nothing changed. I was like, what the hell was I doing? Like, not gotta undo all these fucking stop losses. It was stupid.
Yeah, I'm not making any drastic moves. Probably, some of the policies have been pretty scary, in the Harris camp, but I think they're going to get blocked before they even get, any traction at all. It's just going to be short-term volatility, right?
Agreed.
Mm-hmm. My rationale is that the big money donors are like the owners of these same companies in these industries that we're in. And so you're seeing their moves now. They know how much they've invested. They know the deals that they've made. You're seeing those moves happen now. It's not going to happen after the election. It's, you know what I'm saying? That's how I feel about it. I feel like it's a red herring that they throw out that the election's going to be a big deal, but all the moves have been made before.
Yeah.
And so we'll see. We're probably be a little more volatile as we get closer, once we get into October or say getting closer to November. But yeah, I think ultimately it's going to be a nothing burger. I think markets are going to be fine no matter who wins.
The thing I was disappointed about in the debate was nobody mentioned Bitcoin, and they were championing it like before the debate. Nobody even mentioned anything about Bitcoin and
there was
crypto.
Almost no substance in that debate.
Yep.
I was disappointed as well. There was
that
no
debate
real
was a
policy
joke.
substance in that debate, and I was hoping to hear just something.
Dude, and they gave Trump an opportunity on that whole Obama healthcare thing. He's like, well, when I come up with something, I'm like, fucker, you were there for 4 years and you've had 3 years to think about it since. Like, if not now, when? I'm saying, I feel like the stock market in general would do better with Trump there, but
don't you guys feel like we've been a bit
to chew on? Because either way, I'm gonna make money, dude. I mean, we all going to make adjustments, right? We're smart enough to pick the stocks that we think are going to rise and shine regardless, because fundamentals matter, valuations matter. If people want to buy the fucking electric vehicle, they don't give a shit who the president is, bro. Like, I'm just saying, like, if it makes sense to them and their family, they're going to do it. If solar makes sense to you and your family, you're going to do it. If you want to do the whole oil and gas thing, you're going to do it. If that's what that's the team that you want to cheer against, you're going to find it in your portfolio. So I'm just curious, and I'm surprised you didn't go at Matt with this one, Carlos, when we talked about the energy play. I saw a caption on one of his videos. It might have been on the Chronicles, or you might have done a solo act, but it made it sound like you were pivoting out of oil and gas for the time being, Matt Money. And I wanted to know, was that a thumbnail? Was that just you getting creative, or what's going on there?
No, I have a very firm suspicion that over the next 6 to 12 months, the supply will massively outstrip the demand. And I can go into a quick, I don't want to take over because I feel like I've been stealing a lot, but I can go into that. That's not a lie. That's in the next 6 to 12 months. I'm out unless it's share-based compensation I've sold out, and I plan on potentially adding, if we get into the 40s, 50s for oil price, then TJ, you're about to win this bet, my guy. Sorry.
Dude, I'm trying to be real Joe cool right now, but I'm like legit. It's like a short call option that she's not supposed to work out.
Well, especially the parlay, like you really are a gambler.
I mean, dude, this is like
you're a real gambler.
What's your parlay? I missed this.
He's got a parlay. What is it? A football game?
Yeah, so the Texas has to win by 35.5 points, and they got to score 55.5 collectively. They're sitting on 56 points. Texas is up by 42 with 4 minutes left. I'm not stressed out.
That's yeah. That's the part.
There's so many ways to lose this bet.
But one additional touchdown would, one additional touchdown would help.
You know what happens during garbage time? But you know, garbage time is, it's pretty worrisome too if it's garbage time.
I got parlays on the UFC later tonight, so that's what I'm doing.
I haven't started yet. Did you watch the prelims? I haven't watched the prelims yet. I usually watch the prelims when the main event starts, so I'm caught up and I could just fast forward and watch the fights. But real quick, a point that I wanted to make: do you think that we as a culture have been spoiled by the podcast culture, where the typical debate format doesn't it seem ridiculous now? Having this moderator asking these silly questions, 2 minutes to answer, 1 minute comebacks. It just seems like you're begging people to speak in sound bites, where 1, 3, 4 hour podcasts, like a Lex Friedman podcast or a Joe Rogan podcast, you get way more information and you actually break down and actually see the person. Once they talk past their talking points, once they get past all of that initial stuff, an hour or so into it is when you really start getting some answers.
I think I'm with you. I think I could understand having like a kind of a rapid fire for say 30 minutes, try to understand people's stances, right? But I think that there's so much value in
flush out the platitudes, then get into
exactly. And then you can almost be like, okay, now we're going to talk about it for real. Like, what is the conversation? And it's almost like Joe Rogan, what he does really well is he interjects and like pivots the conversation and like really pinpoints. And I think if you were to get the first 30 minutes, you get all the different things on the table. Are you for or against the border? Are you for or against oil? Are you for and then you kind of just like flush that all out for 30 minutes. Good. For the next hour, then you almost have somebody like a Joe Rogan or somebody that's actually able to pinpoint it. That's a lot less biased, that can get people to kind of like focus rather than this, like you said, they'll have people ramble on for 2 minutes and then fact check you, say you're wrong, have somebody else go on for 2 minutes. It's like you almost talk in circles a lot of times with that.
Just one thing to add on there, because I have sort of I agree with you, Matt and Carlos, and a little bit more nuanced take. Like I think it's counterintuitive for them to make committal stances, because whether they like it or not, they're going to alienate some portion of their demographic. But by standing in the middle and being neutral about everything and not answering any question directly, it pisses us off, because we're like, can you fucking commit to something? But in that type of audience, like there was a number of times in that debate where they could have committed to something to say yes or no, and that would have probably hurt them with some level of the base in some states. And so there is a game theory to this. And I think, I don't know if you guys saw Peter Thiel on the All In.
We were talking about this before we went live. There was some really good speakers there.
I do think there is some game theory, and I was thinking about this in the context of the debate. Like there is some game theory there, because this thing is televised. It's, put out there. There's sound bites everywhere, and anything that you do commit to, they're like, what would be your stance if, something happened with Russia? And I can't remember who it was who was answering this, Peter Thiel, I think it was. He was just like, dude, like, why would I say that stance out loud? Like there is a value in keeping your cards close to your chest, because if you're going to give your entire playbook ahead of, in this case, the election for the debate, like what's the point in that? Your opponent can exploit that. Right. And I'm not saying just in the context.
But here's the thing. I fundamentally disagree with that. This is a job interview. Go into a job interview now and don't give them your resume until after you get the job, or don't tell them what you plan to do until you get the job. I think it's silly. If you just go back and look at the debates from the 1980s or the 70s, look at those debates. They were real debates on policy issues, and most issues are not like black and white. Most issues, there's nuance, and the nuance is where people can disagree. And it would also be great to see some of these candidates on things that they actually agree on. Wouldn't that be great to see them find a topic, find an issue, or drill down to an issue where it's not the extremes of it, but like the core of the issue that you can say we fundamentally agree. Like, for example, if you're like for oil and against oil, you can say, but we do fundamentally agree that the U.S. should be energy independent. Yes. Now you've got ground. You know what I mean?
I think, yeah, and I'd love to see the data on this, but like, I think it's really the game has changed because somebody on X put this out. The map of the U.S. states, whether they voted red or blue, all the way
Chris.
Going back. Was it Chris? If one of you guys can find it and throw it up on the screen.
You have it?
I don't see it. I didn't. Let me see.
If you can find it and throw it up, it's really interesting because what you saw in that was like from 1900 all the way to like 1980s, the country voted on policy. And it didn't matter if you were red or blue. If like people flip-flopped more, there were like a wider base of independence in the middle. But it feels as though, and again, this is what I'm saying, I'd love to see the data. It feels as though it's become more and more of a popularity contest. And that correlates with education, sort of the standard for education going down, that people are not so well informed in the policy, and the media, has a role to play in this and how they shape that narrative, where people vote directly, like in cliques and tribes. Like Trump derangement syndrome is such a real thing that it is like a blocker in the minds of so many people that hinders them from being able to hear the actual words and think from a first principles perspective around like, is this policy good for me, bad for me, whatever. Like this guy is, I'm just saying as an example, right? Like, no taxes on overtime. And they're like, oh, well, this is how this is bad. And meanwhile, like the next week she's coming out with the exact same policy and they're like, this is good. And I'm like, dude, like think for yourself. I'm just using that as an example, but I'm saying that it almost doesn't matter what the policy is because people are going to vote red or vote blue regardless of what the stance is, and that's how it
is. Like it's like supporting your local sports team.
Exactly. They can do no wrong, and like that's I think the thing that kills me a little bit, that makes it disingenuous.
Well, Tavis,
hold on, let's just read this real quick. This is true. People used to seek out the long form. Abe Lincoln went around the country with his Dem opponent Stephen Douglas, holding long form hours public debate lectures in the 18. This is true. They would go and they would just speak for hours directly to the people. I miss that. And you're right. Because of things like social media and the mainstream media, any misstep can be amplified to the point where it could like take your entire campaign down. But I still think that's the better move for us. I think if the people demanded that, we would get it. I think we're okay not getting it because really nobody's mind was changed by any debate. Nobody's mind was changed by any debate anymore.
Carlos, one thing to add to that though, it's not like people didn't try. I mean, if you just look past the media the past few weeks before the debate, it's not like people didn't try to ask Kamala questions, for example. It was obvious that she wasn't answering any questions, right?
And so that was a strategy. That was a calculated strategy that they were betting her not speaking will hurt her less than speaking, and that's fine. That's a strategy you can play.
Yeah,
I think someone won the bet. I think so. Yeah, boy.
Oh, that is jubilation. Okay, sorry.
Well, I think, and this just goes back to the appreciation of these podcasts. I think that's why,
true,
that's why nobody really watches. I mean, I don't know about anybody else, but I probably tune into my local news from time to time. That's pretty much it. I think even now with viewership, right? I think a lot of people appreciate these podcasts like Joe Rogan, PBD, the All In podcast. Like those are the ones where it's more candid conversations and
actually viewership among those has far surpassed what the mainstream media. The only thing is though, for like a majority of the voting bloc, like the boomers, they're still getting most of their news from the mainstream media. And so they're not the ones, there's only so much that like the middle independents and like the Gen Zs can affect. So you really have to kind of wait for the boomers to age out. Can we do a poll real quick, Shane? This is to do a poll, red or blue? I'm curious what the spread would be on the 185 people that are watching right now. I'm curious what we get in the comments too afterwards, if you want to just put in the comments. But let's just do a quick poll and then we'll we'll end it there. But go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
But no, I just wanted to add with Tevis. I actually do agree with Tevis. I mean, the policies that we talk about now is a little bit different from the policies that we talk about today. Like, about not, Peter Thiel talked about this in the All In podcast about not showing your cards. I think with Tevis, right, it was about China, right? Like, why would you show your cards when you're dealing with a superpower? So, and I know
that makes sense.
Yeah, and Carlos, sense. You said you disagree with that, but for me, I'm like, well, in a debate stage, and this is going national, I wouldn't be showing my cards to superpowers when you're dealing with someone like Xi, right? So,
wait.
It actually shows Trump's strength, to be honest. I mean, I'm not
just to clarify, when you're talking about tactics or strategies with companies that you either in some sort of disagreement with or at war with, no, I agree with you. You don't disclose those positions, but it's almost like the U.S. doesn't have a domestic policy anymore. Everything is all just based on this sort of international policy, and there are domestic issues with which they're polarizing. And we should know where people stand on those things, because essentially what you want to be able to do is, for the 6 or 7 months leading up to an election, do your research. And then once you vote that person in, you want to be able to just go and live your life. That's the point, right? You say, okay, I trust this person. I know where they stand. They represent me. And then they're going to go off and do what they got to do. And I'm going to live my life. And I'll see you in 3 years when it's time to get reelected. That's the way that it should work, I think.
And and again, for me, I've said this before in conversations like this, is the actions will speak louder than words. And again, I don't know, I can't predict the future. I don't know what's going to happen. All I know is, sometimes I think about this. I feel like at this point, having a conversation with the opposing side becomes almost irrelevant, because it's just one ear out the other. I mean, even with the smallest topics where you think yourself subjectively, it makes sense, but then there's always an opposing counter to that, right? There's a lot of polarizing issues, right? Like, things like what is a woman, racism, things like that. Those are things that are pretty much polarizing issues. So, that's, to me, that has been, ever since that's been made a big deal, I think that is when people have become more just more staying in their own lane. I don't want to hear what you have to say. Again, the TDS is pretty legit. Like it's pretty true.
Well, so that's why I think you need to continue to have the conversations. The moment you stop having the conversations, you're declaring that person is the enemy. There's no more point, and now they must be destroyed. And that's why I think that's dangerous. Because here's the thing: no matter who wins, there's going to be 48 or 51% of the country that is still going to be believing the other side. You still have to coexist with these people.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's good to have these podcasts, these kind of legitimate, like just natural conversations, instead of the media. Because I mean, can we really all? I think we can universally agree that the media is pretty biased, right? And it's and to me,
corporations, they're for profit. They're for profit corporations. This is why the podcast format works much better, because the incentive structure is different. The incentive structure is to get to the truth, because that's what brings the eyeballs versus.
And this is not just in politics. I mean, this is in stocks too, in finance, right? I mean, don't we shit on Kramer once he says something like on X, and then you see the messages like, yeah, I'm doing the opposite.
But with that, it's just ridiculous. The data on that is ridiculous. So here, Shane, why don't you take us out? Can you just take us through the results of the polls that we've got, and then we'll call it for today.
Yeah, let me just pull it up here for you.
I think
hey, how did you guys like the price action of Bitcoin though? We need to talk about that.
Oh, I know. That'll probably be like there's only so much we can fit into one, but yeah, but Bitcoin, oh man, Bitcoin
recovered, dude.
Over 60 now.
Yeah, I think it touched 60.
It was over 60. I think it was over 60 when we started.
And TJ, oh dude, when I left the last podcast a little early, dude, I was laughing my ass off when you were like, "Yeah, I bought the top," and then you guys just laughed about it, dude. That was I don't know
because
why
like you bought it immediately.
yeah. He was like, "Oh man, I bought at the top."
Dude, I still haven't added. All I have is that 10 grand.
But I love how like your little DCA is 10 grand. That's a lot of cash.
I mean, I obviously have a shitload in Riot, and then I started building a position on BITX.
Yeah, the miners have been kind of looking enticing lately, man. You know, especially with the Bitcoin.
Keep in mind, bro, this Riot could easily go to $3, and you know it's real hard to make a case why it shouldn't be there now. So just be careful and know what you're getting into, bro. I'm telling you, she's a real good woman when things are going well, but she's a fucking cheater. Okay, so just keep that in mind.
Well, that's like the degeneracy in me is like looking at those Bitcoin miners. Like, if I'm really bullish on Bitcoin, then these miners looking tasty right now.
Yeah, there's a reason they've been around the block.
So what do we got here? How many polls did we do, Shane? Did we do 2? Didn't we do one at the top?
I can't see the poll. Let me see.
If you look it's in the chat, because you can't see them after the pod is over. Oh, you did this one. Is the presidential debate a joke and needs to change the format? Scrap the format for something else. 29%. Make it an interview podcast. 29%. Less bickering and more substance, 25%. Change the candidate, 16%. So that's evenly split among scrapping the format or making it a podcast format.
I think before they even determine that, they need to make sure that the grounds are at least unbiased, right? I mean, they had this on ABC. There's also you
can't have it be unbiased. And I would actually say the CNN moderators in the first debate were fine.
No, but Carlos, like for instance, like the ABC, right? I don't know if this is true, but you can't have a sorority sister of Kamala.
Oh yeah, I saw
be part of the moderator team.
But you can if she, like what you're saying is like she can't put her own personal biases away. Of course,
dude, have Joe Rogan, like, you know.
I think you have someone from CNN, someone from Fox, and then somebody like me who doesn't give a fuck about
exactly. You get someone who's right leaning, someone who's left leaning, get an independent, big personality. Get an independent, or you do it like you do. I mean, you do it like you do an earnings call, right? Have people kind of put the questions up. Have a group of people put the questions up, and then the viewers can vote on the ones that they want actually asked. You know, I'm a big fan of that. The earnings call format works really well. By and large, you get the answers that you want, right?
I think
institutions, and you get your retail investors.
I think one thing moderators could do is when they ask the question, be like, and I know how you feel about the candidate. We're not interested in that. What's your answer about this policy situation?
Right.
And like direct the fucking horse to the water trough and try to dip his head in there and make the motherfucker drink.
Yeah. Or like Matt was saying,
Donald Trump's doing all of this shit and answering the question, and Kamala just reciting the bullshit that she looks like she practiced for 2 or 3 days. So I'm like, dude, make them answer the damn question at hand. I don't care about the other shit right now. We can talk about that later. And so the moderators have a job that they could be doing as well, and they were just choosing not to do it, in my opinion. So everybody wants to like shit on Donald Trump not doing well. Kamala, I thought she did pretty well with what she had to work with, but the moderators could give us a better product, in my opinion.
But even like, and Amit would attest to this. There's a difference between like. Debating is one skill in and of itself. You can win a debate and have the weaker position.
Yeah, but can you implement?
So there's a difference when it comes to like, did you win the debate? The point is like, okay, you could have won the debate, but did the viewers get the answers that they were looking for? And that's different, right?
So I think that Kamala, I mean, just to call a spade, I think Kamala won the debate. I think the viewers lost. I think the biggest losers were us, because we're just left with a bunch of unanswered questions, and I don't feel any better or any worse for either one of them. Like if I'm someone on the fence, I feel like nothing happened. I wasted 2 or 3 hours of my life. That's what happened.
And all I'm suggesting is that the format is inherently not conducive to getting those answers, especially when you say there's going to be 2 minutes and then you're going to get a 1 minute response. You have to distill some really nuanced answers into sound bites. That essentially is what it becomes. Who's got the best sound bites? Because you know that everything's going to get clipped into 10, 20-second clips and be spread about all over social media. And that's the next level of it, that the debate isn't actually the end of it. It's what happens the next day when the armies go out, right? The social media armies go out, and then you can actually relitigate it. You can look better or worse. But I think if you do a 3-hour-long Lex Friedman podcast, you've got to be really interested in the issues to sit through a 3-hour Lex Friedman podcast with no timestamps, or sit through a Twitter Spaces. You got to be a certain kind of person who wants answers.
Right.
All right. Well, we'll leave it there. We went a little bit over. I appreciate all you guys coming on. 398 people. Thanks so much. If you haven't, hit like, hit subscribe. And any other poll? Did we get another poll here, Shane?
For the next one, do this one. Do y'all really think people are out there eating pets? My wife and I have been fighting about it since the fucking day.
What's funny is the next day, I don't know about you guys, but the whole feed. My whole feed was like all these videos. Like, I don't know, but it's like
I'm guarding Duke and G Money like crazy right now. Like, are people really out there eating cats and dogs? Like, is that like a thing? Or like, I mean, it's just they're just giving you so much, dude. It's hard to sift through the bullshit.
The songs the next day, the like remixes were fucking gold.
The memes are awesome. That was
the memes were really awesome. All right, well, thank you, gentlemen, for spending an hour and a half with me here.
Thank you.
I had a lot of fun on this, and I again leaving with more questions and answers. Let's do this again. We'll keep this going over the next couple of weeks. We got some big things happening, right? We'll see what happens with Raycus next week. We got the Tesla 1010 event. There's some stuff with Uber. It's some exciting shit over next week.
This week's gonna be pretty crazy, so I can't wait for next week.
Crazy this week. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens next Saturday.
See what happens on the interest rate cuts. And thanks, Matt and Money, for bringing the education on
knowledge.
I'm just definitely not an expert, so please fact check some of that stuff.
No, and Matt, I like I already told you this on private chats that about Rocket Labs. Like I haven't, known nothing, minuscule compared to you, and then you did that stream a few days ago, and I was like, wow, I didn't know that Rocket Labs was doing this. I didn't know about the satellites and things like that. So, I mean, I'm gonna do more, my own research, but I appreciated that.
But now we just have to convince Tevis.
Tevis needs to update us later on what's going on with him working at SoFi. He's low-key didn't say shit about it. I read it on X.
Oh, what the heck?
I know SoFi better than all these fucking analysts. Hire me. What's going on there, Tevis?
Anything you want to say? You have 2 minutes. You have 2 minutes to answer, and 1 minute, and TJ's going to get a minute to respond.
Yeah, bro. Do you see this shitty Canadian Wi-Fi? I need to get the hell out of this country. All right, I need to find a way, TJ. I need to find a way, man.
Bro, I had a niece that I
wanted you're all out like Agent Smith right now. Tweaking out. Your face tweaks out, and Anthony Noto pops out. Well, and congratulations, TJ. Congratulations, TJ. You made some money today.
Congrats. Yep. It's always good to see people winning, man.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, guys, so much. I'm going to end it now.
All right. And we'll thanks, guys.
Week.
Cheers.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you guys.